The Galactic Military Academy had exactly one rule that everyone agreed on. From the microscopic Flender to the gas giant-sized Vorath, do not volunteer for the gauntlet. This was not a suggestion. This was survival instinct encoded into approximately 473 different species' genetic memory at this point. Instructor Vrel stood at the front of the briefing room, all four of his arms crossed in what his species considered the universal symbol for, "You are about to hear something unpleasant." His exoskeleton was decorated with enough combat ribbons to wallpaper a small spacecraft, and his compound eyes had seen things that would make a lesser being weep. He had given this speech 216 times. He hated it more with each repetition. "The gauntlet," he began, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into flat, ominous standard, "has a fatality rate of 40%. Another 35% require extensive medical reconstruction. The remaining 25% experience psychological trauma requiring therapy for a minimum of 6 standard cycles. There is no glory here. There is no honor. There is only survival or failure. Questions?" Marcus Webb raised his hand. He was human, which already made Vrel's primary stomach clench, and he had that particular expression that Vrel had learned to associate with catastrophically poor decision-making. The human was lean, scarred in that casual way that suggested he had survived things through sheer spite, and sitting with the kind of relaxed posture that other species reserved for nap time. "Yeah, quick question," Marcus said. "Do you guys have a leaderboard for this thing?" Vrel's mandibles clicked in confusion. Leaderboard? You know, fastest time, best score, that kind of thing." Marcus leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under the stress of supporting someone who clearly had no concept of self-preservation. "Also, can I get a stopwatch? My wrist unit's busted." Across the room, Torvik, a Blendari whose species had evolved from prey animals and had never quite gotten over it, made a sound like air escaping from a punctured lung. His fur was already standing on end, and they had not even reached the scary part of the briefing yet. Quinn, a Zentari warrior whose people prided themselves on fearlessness, shifted uncomfortably. Even she looked at Marcus like he had just proposed juggling live grenades in a fuel depot. "There is no leaderboard," Vrel said slowly, "because the objective is survival, not speed. The gauntlet is not a competition. It is a proving ground designed by the collective's top military scientists to test the absolute limits of combat readiness under impossible conditions." Right, impossible conditions, got it. Marcus nodded like Vrel had just explained how to operate a coffee machine. "But someone's gotten through it fastest, yeah? What's the record?" Vrel felt a headache forming behind his optical clusters. 6 hours and 15 minutes, held by Commander Zrath of the Korthian Empire. He lost 3 limbs and spent 2 years in regeneration afterward. He is considered the toughest being in known space. "Sick," Marcus said with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "So I just gotta beat 6 hours. You have to survive," Vrel corrected, his voice taking on the edge of someone who was reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. "Survival is the only objective." "Survival in under 6 hours, got it." Vrel made a sound that the translator helpfully rendered as prolonged exasperation. This was going to be a very long day. Vrel pulled up the holo display with 2 of his arms while using the other 2 to gesture at what could only be described as a 3-dimensional diagram of concentrated nightmares. The gauntlet sprawled across the screen in all its terrible glory, a maze of death traps that had been lovingly crafted by beings who had clearly been denied hugs as children. "The gauntlet was created 53 cycles ago," Vrel began, falling into the familiar rhythm of his speech, "after the collective realized that our elite forces were, statistically speaking, not elite enough. The initial design killed 100% of test subjects. We have since refined it to merely murderous." The first section of the course lit up on the display. Gravity wells, zones where gravity shifts from 0 to 8 times standard, sometimes in the span of a single step. Most trainees spend an hour here moving cautiously, calculating each movement. Last year, Cadet Thrix attempted to rush through. They scraped what was left of him off the ceiling. We still use the footage for safety briefings. Marcus was leaning forward now, studying the display with the intensity of someone planning a grocery run, not a death march. Plasma corridors, Vrel continued, highlighting the next section. Superheated energy barriers in random patterns. Standard procedure is to wait, observe the pattern for 20 minutes minimum, then proceed with extreme caution. Cadet Vixtar tried to sprint through on a dare. His species does not cremate their dead, but in his case, the work was already done. Is the pattern actually random, Marcus asked, or does it loop? Vrel blinked several eyes in sequence. It loops every 47 seconds. Why would you? Just curious. Continue. The instructor felt that familiar sensation that he had come to associate with humans, the feeling that he was explaining quantum physics to a species that had discovered fire last week and was already trying to cook the universe with it. He pressed on. Predator drones. Autonomous hunter-killers programmed with the combat data of 300 species. They track heat, motion, electrical signatures, and scent. Standard doctrine is stealth, evasion, and if absolutely necessary, brief engagement followed by immediate retreat to cover. Cadet Giron tried to fight one directly. We sent his family a very small box. How many drones? Marcus asked. 12. And they're programmed to hunt? Yes. Cool. Marcus was nodding like Vrel had just confirmed the cafeteria was serving pizza. What's after that? Vrel pulled up the next image and even he suppressed a shudder. The reality maze. A psychic assault course that manifests your deepest fears, your greatest regrets, your most painful memories. It is designed by telepathic specialists to break you mentally where the previous obstacles failed physically. Trainees have spent weeks trapped inside their own minds. Some never leave. How big is it? Marcus asked. Roughly 200 meters square. But size is irrelevant. The psychological component makes it feel infinite. But it's actually 200 meters. Cadet Webb, you are missing the point. No, I get it, spooky brain maze, very scary. I'm just saying it's got walls, right? Real walls? Vrel made that exasperation sound again. Yes, real walls, which you will never find because you will be trapped in a nightmare of your own creation. Noted. Marcus was definitely not noting this in the way Vrel intended. The instructor pulled up the final section, his voice dropping. The Crucible, an adaptive combat arena controlled by a military-grade AI. It learns from every attempt, counters every strategy. It combines every previous obstacle plus armed combat drones, environmental hazards, and lethal force authorization. It has never been beaten. The only way through is the emergency abort, which most trainees activate within 30 seconds. Has anyone ever not activated it? Marcus asked. 4 beings. 3 are dead. 1 is in a coma. So there's a chance. Vrel set down the display controller harder than necessary. Cadet Webb, I need you to understand something. Marcus grinned. So you're saying there's pressure to perform? I am saying you're going to die. Probably not. Definitely. Tell you what, Marcus said, standing up and stretching like they had just agreed to a friendly game instead of his imminent demise. Let me try it. If I die, you get to say you were right. If I don't, you give me that stopwatch. Vrel looked at this human, this ridiculous, suicidal, grinning human, and made a decision he would regret for the rest of his considerably long life. Fine. Tomorrow. Dawn cycle. And when you quit after the first obstacle, you will apologize to this entire class for wasting their time. Deal, Marcus said. But just so we're clear, I won't be the one apologizing. The observation deck overlooked the gauntlet like a theater box seat designed by pessimists. Vrel stood at the main console, surrounded by monitoring equipment that tracked everything from heart rate to last words. The entire training facility had turned out to watch, which was either morbid curiosity or a really slow day. Probably both. Marcus stood at the starting line wearing standard-issue combat gear that looked like it had been designed by a committee that had never met a human. It fit weirdly, bulked in wrong places, but he had refused adjustments. Said it was fine. Humans said a lot of things were fine that were objectively catastrophic. Cadet Webb, Vrel's voice echoed through the arena. You have one final chance to abort. There is no shame in... The starting buzzer had not even finished its preliminary chirp before Marcus was moving. Not the careful, measured advance of someone entering a death trap. No, this maniac was sprinting like someone had just announced a limited-time sale on survival. Oh, for the love of... Vrel's translator gave up on his next string of clicks. He just ran in. Without stretching, without planning. He just ran directly into the gravity wells. The first gravity shift would have pulped anyone who hit it at speed. Standard procedure was to edge forward, test each zone, and proceed with caution. Marcus hit the first shift, felt the gravity spike, and instead of stopping, he jumped. What is he doing? Torvik squeaked from the observation deck. He is using the momentum, Quinn breathed, her warrior instincts recognizing something her brain refused to accept. He is not fighting the gravity changes. He is riding them. Marcus pinballed through the gravity wells like a demented acrobat, using each shift to redirect his velocity. When gravity spiked, he went with it, letting it slam him down and then pushing off the floor before it shifted again. When it zeroed out, he used the momentum to sail across dead zones. It was not elegant. It probably was not even safe. But it was working. And it was fast. 14 seconds, Vrel said weakly, staring at the timer. He cleared the gravity wells in 14 seconds. The record was 58 minutes. Marcus landed in a roll at the entrance to the plasma corridors, took exactly 2 seconds to watch the pattern, and then did something that made everyone in the observation deck inhale simultaneously. He took off his jacket. No, Vrel whispered. No, do not. Marcus wrapped the jacket around his arm and charged into the plasma corridor like a linebacker going for a tackle. The superheated energy barriers seared the fabric instantly, but he was using it as a momentary shield, timing his movements to the pattern he had memorized in those 2 seconds of observation. When one barrier dissipated, he was already moving through the gap. When another formed, his makeshift shield took the hit. He is just running through them, Vrel shrieked, his careful instructor composure evaporating like Marcus's jacket. You are supposed to wait. You are supposed to be careful. You are supposed to... Marcus emerged from the plasma corridor smoking slightly. His jacket reduced to charred scraps, a burn across his shoulder that he patted out casually like he had just brushed against a hot stove. 2 minutes, 40 seconds, someone whispered. The Predator drones activated, their sensors locking onto the heat signature that was now very clearly human-shaped and approaching fast. 12 autonomous killing machines deployed from their charging stations, fanning out in a perfect hunter pattern that had been refined over decades of trial and error. Marcus saw them, stopped, and then did something that made Vrel's primary brain contemplate early retirement. He started waving his arms and shouting, "Over here! Come on, you flying trash cans, I'm right here!" Is he taunting them? Torvik asked. He is attracting all 12 simultaneously, Quinn said. That is suicide. That is beyond suicide. That is aggressive suicide. The drones converged, weapons charging. Marcus waited until they were almost in firing range, then sprinted directly at the nearest wall. Not away from the drones. At the wall. He hit it at full speed, planted a foot, and wall ran upward just as the drones opened fire. Their targeting systems, programmed for 300 species worth of combat behavior, had never encountered anyone who moved like they were personally offended by gravity. The drones fired at where Marcus should have been, which was on the ground like a sensible person. Instead, he was 6 feet up a wall, launching himself into a jump that carried him over the nearest drone. Hey, he landed on it, rode it like a mechanical bull as it tried to shake him off, used his momentum to kick off it directly into another drone, which he grabbed and redirected into a third. The drone's own weapons fire started hitting each other as they tried to track a target that was treating their hunter pattern like a jungle gym. 4 minutes, Vrel said numbly. He has turned the Predator drones into his personal demolition crew. Marcus used the chaos of 12 confused killing machines to destroy 2 of the remaining obstacles, then simply ran through the wreckage, while the drones tried to figure out what had just happened to their entire operational doctrine. He crossed into the reality maze threshold, and for the first time since entering the gauntlet, he stopped moving. Vrel leaned forward. Finally, something has stopped him. The reality maze will... 4 minutes later, Marcus walked out the other side looking mildly annoyed. The observation deck had gone completely silent, which was impressive considering it currently held approximately 70 beings from 40 different species, most of whom had never agreed on anything except that what they were watching was impossible. Did he just... Torvik could not even finish the sentence. 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Vrel said, his voice completely flat. The fastest anyone has ever exited the reality maze was 6 hours. Most take days. Some never leave. Marcus was checking his non-existent watch, looking around like he was waiting for something more to happen. Cadet Webb. Vrel's voice crackled over the intercom, and he hated how it sounded slightly unhinged. What did you see in there? Marcus looked up at the observation window, shrugged. My high school gym class. Still terrible. That is not how the reality maze works. It manifests your deepest psychological trauma, your greatest fears, the things that keep you awake at night. Yeah, gym class, Marcus repeated. Coach Henderson screaming about rope climbing while I'm pretty sure having a heart attack. Dodgeball with kids who had accuracy problems and anger issues. That one semester we had to square dance, it was all there. Still sucked. Vrel pulled up the psychic sensors data, trying to understand. The reality maze had activated properly. It had read Marcus's mind, constructed the appropriate nightmare scenario, and deployed full psychological assault protocols. By all measurements, it should have worked. How did you escape? Vrel asked. The psychological barriers are specifically designed to trap you in recursive trauma loops. Oh, I didn't escape. I just ignored it. You ignored it. Yeah. I mean, it was all clearly not real, right? Wrong decade, wrong location, and Coach Henderson has been dead for like 20 years. Plus, the whole fear thing doesn't really work when you've been in actual combat. Fake high school is pretty low on the threat assessment list compared to actual people shooting actual bullets. Quinn leaned over to Torvik. Is he saying his species just does not process psychological trauma the same way? I think he is saying humans are too stubborn to be properly traumatized, Torvik whispered back. Vrel was scrolling through the data, his growing sense of horror matching the readouts. Cadet Webb, the psychic assault was functioning at full capacity. You should have been catatonic. Oh, I felt it working, Marcus said cheerfully. But here's the thing about trying to scare someone with their past. I've already lived through it once. Not really interested in a rerun, so I just followed the air current. The air current? Yeah, there's ventilation in there, right? Has to be, otherwise people would suffocate during their multi-day trauma sessions. So I just walked toward the fresh air. Figured it would lead to an exit eventually. Took like 3 minutes to find the door. Spent another minute making sure it was the right door and not some psychological trick door. It was fine. The observation deck erupted into multiple languages worth of disbelief. He treated a military-grade psychic weapon like a room with poor air conditioning, someone said. The human just logicked his way through a nightmare maze, another voice added. I am filing a bug report with the Psychic Warfare Division, Vrel muttered, making notes on his datapad with shaking appendages. Marcus was looking at the final section of the gauntlet now, the Crucible, which loomed ahead like the universe's most aggressive architectural statement. So that's the unbeatable part, right? Yes, Vrel said. And before you ask, no, you cannot just ignore an adaptive combat AI. It uses lethal force. Real, physical, actual lethal force. Not psychological, not a simulation. It will kill you. Has it killed everyone who tried? Not everyone. As I mentioned, 4 have attempted it without aborting. 3 died. 1 is in a coma. So technically, there's a 25% survival rate. That is not how statistics... Vrel stopped himself. Cadet Webb, you have already exceeded every expectation. You have set records that will probably get this course redesigned. You can abort now with more honor than any being in history. What's my current time? Marcus asked. Vrel checked the display. 8 minutes and 53 seconds. And the overall record is 6 hours? Yes, but... Cool. I'm going in. Cadet Webb. But Marcus was already walking toward the Crucible's entrance. and Vrel realized with dawning horror that he was going to have to watch a human die today. And worse, he was going to have to file paperwork about it. The crucible's doors opened with a hiss that sounded distinctly ominous, as if the facility's architects had specifically programmed it to sound like death inviting you in for tea. Marcus paused at the threshold, studied the dark interior for exactly 10 seconds, and then cracked his knuckles. "All right," he said to no one in particular. "Let's see what you got." "I cannot watch," Torvik said, covering his eyes with his paws. "I cannot not watch," Quinn said, leaning forward. Vrel just pulled up every monitoring system the Crucible had. Because if this human was about to become a historical footnote, someone needed to document exactly how it happened. The Crucible activated with the kind of mechanical precision that suggested it had been waiting for this moment. Lights flickered on in sequence, revealing an arena that was part obstacle course, part firing range, and entirely designed by people who had watched too many action movies and decided to make them lethal. The AI's voice echoed through the space, synthesized and cold. Combatant detected. Analyzing threat profile. Profile unknown. Initiating standard protocol. Marcus took 3 steps in before the first trap activated. Floor panels dropped away, revealing a pit that was definitely deep enough to matter. He jumped it casually, landed in a roll, kept moving. Floor traps, gravity wells, plasma barriers, and predator drones detected in previous sections, the AI reported, its voice taking on what might have been confusion if machines could be confused. Combatant cleared all obstacles at unprecedented speed, adjusting difficulty to maximum. "Oh, good," Marcus muttered. "It's a try hard." In the observation deck, Vrel was experiencing what his species called a full system stress response, which humans would recognize as a panic attack if panic attacks involved all 4 arms flailing independently. "This is it," he said. "This is where physics and human stubbornness finally meet. You cannot speedrun an adaptive AI. It learns. It counters. It..." Marcus dodged the first weapons drone by diving under a plasma barrier that the AI had activated as a deterrent, using the barrier itself as cover. The weapons drone, unable to fire through the plasma, adjusted position. Marcus was already moving, using the drone's repositioning to get closer to the next objective marker. "He is using the defenses against each other," Quinn breathed. "The AI creates a barrier to stop him. He uses the barrier to block the drone." The AI seemed to realize this too, because its next move was more aggressive. Multiple drones deployed simultaneously, barriers shut down, and the gravity wells activated in a pattern designed to immobilize any intruder. Marcus hit the first gravity spike, felt the 8 times standard weight crush down, and instead of trying to fight through it like every other species would, he dropped flat and let it slam him against the floor. Then, the instant it cycled to 0G, he pushed off with everything he had, sailing across the arena like a missile with a bad attitude. "That is not proper technique," Vrel shrieked. "That is barely technique at all," Torvik added. "That is working," Quinn said quietly. The AI was learning, but it was learning from 300 species worth of combat doctrine, and none of those species had apparently included "what if the combatant is completely unhinged" in their tactical database. It kept creating obstacles designed for cautious, strategic advancement. Marcus kept treating them like suggestions. A weapons turret emerged from the wall, tracking his movement. Marcus grabbed a piece of debris from a destroyed drone, threw it at the turret's sensor cluster, and used the momentary blind spot to close distance. He did not try to destroy the turret. He just slapped a piece of his burned jacket over its barrel and kept running. The turret fired. The barrel exploded from the obstruction, and shrapnel took out 2 other defensive systems. "He is weaponizing failure," Vrel said, watching the display with the expression of someone whose understanding of reality was actively being revised. "He is making the environment destroy itself." The AI's voice had taken on a tone that definitely sounded frustrated now. "Combatant is employing non-standard tactics, recalculating threat assessment. Warning, injury detected." Marcus had taken a plasma blast to his left arm, the shot searing through the combat suit and leaving a burn that would have sent most species into shock. He looked at it, made a sound that was probably not appropriate for a military academy, and then used the injury to his advantage. The AI's sensors detected the damage and assumed he would fall back, seek cover, apply medical attention. That was what every other species did. Marcus used the AI's assumption against it, moving through what should have been a kill zone because the AI had already shifted resources to cover his expected retreat. 19 minutes, someone whispered in the observation deck. The final section of the crucible was an open arena. No cover, no tricks, just the combatant versus the AI's ultimate defense protocol. 3 advanced combat drones equipped with lethal weaponry and a learning algorithm that had adapted to Marcus' strategy of aggressive chaos. The drones spread out in a perfect formation, covering all angles. Their weapons charged. The AI's voice echoed with what might have been satisfaction. Combatant has nowhere to run. Surrender or face termination. Marcus stopped, breathing hard, definitely injured, definitely exhausted. For a moment it looked like he might actually abort. Then he did something that made Vrel's species' equivalent of blood pressure spike dangerously. He started running at the drones, not away, at them. No, Vrel said. No, that is suicide, that is... Marcus hit the first drone at full sprint, used his momentum to crash into it, bore it to the ground in a tackle that would have made a collision sport athlete proud. The other drones fired, but their targeting systems were programmed to avoid friendly fire. With Marcus wrestling their fellow drone, they could not get a clean shot. The human used those 3 seconds to rip a panel off the first drone, yank out something that looked important, and throw the sparking piece of electronics at the second drone's sensor cluster. Then he ran again, not in a straight line, but in a pattern chaotic enough that the targeting systems could not predict where he would be next. He grabbed another piece of debris, threw it at the third drone, missed completely. But the drone dodged anyway because its threat assessment algorithm assumed any projectile from this maniac was potentially catastrophic. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus closed the distance, jumped, landed on the drone, and rode it like the world's most dangerous rodeo while using his confiscated electronics piece to short out its systems. The final drone recalculated, determined that standard protocols were insufficient, and activated its self-destruct sequence as a last resort. Marcus saw the warning lights, jumped off his current drone mount, hit the ground rolling, and crossed the finish line just as the explosion rocked the arena. The buzzer sounded, the doors opened. Marcus stood up, smoking, bleeding, definitely in need of medical attention, and looked up at the observation deck. "What's my time?" he called out. Vrel stared at the display. The numbers did not make sense. They could not make sense. He checked the calibration, checked for errors, checked for signs he was experiencing a species-specific hallucinogen. 23 minutes, he said, his voice barely functioning. 23 minutes and 47 seconds. The observation deck erupted. Beings were shouting in languages Vrel did not recognize. Alarms were going off because the system thought there had been a malfunction. Torvik had fainted. Quinn was just staring, her warrior's brain trying and failing to process what she had witnessed. Marcus looked disappointed. Damn, I was hoping for under 20. And that was when Instructor Vrel sat down, put his head in 2 of his 4 hands, and seriously considered a career change. The medical team swarmed Marcus like he was a celebrity arriving at a premiere, except instead of cameras, they had scanners, and instead of excitement, they had clinical horror at his various injuries. Burns, contusions, a possible fracture in his left arm, and what one medic described as trauma patterns consistent with being hit by a small spacecraft. Marcus was confused by the attention. "I'm fine," he kept saying, which made the medical team exchange glances that suggested they were adding human pain tolerance to the long list of things that needed immediate research funding. Vrel remained at the observation deck, staring at the display that showed Marcus's run on replay. 23 minutes and 47 seconds. The previous record, 6 hours and 15 minutes, held by a being who was considered the toughest warrior in known space, shattered by a human who had asked for a stopwatch and treated a death trap like a personal challenge. Torvik recovered from his faint, looked at the replay, and promptly fainted again. Quinn approached Vrel slowly, the way one might approach someone experiencing a crisis. "Instructor, are you functional?" "No," Vrel said simply. "I have trained warriors from 400 species. I have seen beings who can lift starships, survive in hard vacuum, regenerate from catastrophic damage. I thought I understood combat. I thought I understood determination. I was wrong." "What did we just witness?" Quinn asked. Vrel gestured at the replay with 2 arms while the other 2 hung limply at his sides. "Humans do not conquer fear. They do not overcome danger through superior tactics or advanced technology. They simply do not respect it. They see a challenge specifically designed to be impossible, and their first response is not to strategize or prepare. It is to ask how fast they can do it." Down in the medical bay, Marcus was arguing with 3 different doctors about whether he needed to stay for observation. "I've had worse," he was saying, which made one of the doctors pull up his medical file and page through increasing concerns about human anatomy and damage thresholds. "Cadet Webb," the head physician said, "you have 2nd-degree burns across 17% of your body. So not even a 5th. That's like a B- at worst. That is not how injuries—" The physician stopped, looked at her colleagues, looked back at Marcus. "Do humans understand that pain is a warning system, not a scoring mechanism?" "Oh, we understand. We just have different opinions about what counts as worth worrying about." Back in the observation deck, the communication console was lighting up like a festival display. Vrel ignored it for as long as he could, which was approximately 30 seconds before his superior officer's voice crackled through. "Vrel, what in the name of every deity in the collective database just happened?" "Cadet Marcus Webb completed the gauntlet in under 24 minutes, sir." Silence, then. "That is not possible. I have the footage. I have the sensor logs. I have approximately 70 witnesses. It happened." More silence. "We need to convene an emergency meeting. Now." The meeting, held via holographic conference because several key officials refused to believe the reports without seeing the data personally, devolved into chaos approximately 4 minutes after it started. "This invalidates 50 years of training doctrine," someone from the Combat Development Division said. "This suggests our threat assessment models are fundamentally flawed," added a strategist. "This means we need to either ban humans from all military training or recruit as many as possible," said a recruitment officer. "This means I need a drink," Vrel muttered, off mic. Marcus appeared at the observation deck door, having apparently escaped medical by simply walking out while they were arguing about his treatment plan. He looked slightly more bandaged than before, but otherwise in good spirits. "Hey, Instructor," he said. "Quick question." Vrel turned slowly, all 4 eyes focusing on this being who had just upended his entire understanding of combat training. "Yes? Cadet Webb? You mentioned there's an advanced course?" The observation deck went silent. Every being present turned to stare at Marcus with expressions ranging from admiration to horror to what might have been religious awe. "There is no advanced course," Vrel said carefully. "The gauntlet is the advanced course. There is nothing beyond it because we never imagined anyone would—" He stopped himself. "Why are you asking?" Marcus grinned. "Just figured, now that I know the route and what to expect, I could probably get my time down. Maybe try for under 20 minutes. Also, I was thinking, if there are other courses at other facilities, might be fun to check those out too." Torvik, who had just recovered from his 2nd fainting spell, promptly had a 3rd. Quinn started laughing. The kind of laughter that came from a warrior recognizing something simultaneously impressive and terrifying. Vrel looked at Marcus, at the wreckage of the gauntlet still smoldering on the displays, at the communication console still exploding with messages from high command, and made a decision. "Cadet Webb, I am putting in for a transfer." "Oh, did I do something wrong?" "No. You did everything wrong, which somehow turned out right, and I can no longer handle the stress. I am requesting a desk job. Somewhere quiet, somewhere without humans." "That's fair," Marcus said. "Hey, before you go though, do you have that stopwatch? You did say I could get one if I didn't abort." Vrel reached into his equipment pouch, pulled out a standard-issue chronometer and handed it over with the air of someone passing on a cursed artifact. "Here, may it bring you all the challenges you so aggressively pursue." "Thanks." Marcus checked the chronometer, nodded approvingly. This is great, so, about that advanced course? There is no advanced course. Vrel's voice cracked slightly. The gauntlet was supposed to be impossible. You were supposed to respect that. But no, you humans see a death trap and treat it like a leaderboard. You see a warning and hear a challenge. You experience pain and consider it feedback for improvement. Marcus thought about this. Is that bad? It is terrifying. Your entire species is terrifying. You do not have superior technology. You do not have enhanced physical abilities. You do not have psychic powers. You just have the absolute refusal to acknowledge that some things are supposed to stop you. And somehow, that works. Huh. Marcus looked genuinely thoughtful. You know, my old drill sergeant back on Earth said something similar, right before he gave me an award for most improved. I am giving you an award for most traumatizing to instructional staff, Vrel said. It comes with a note in your file that suggests other academies prepare extensively before accepting your enrollment. The communication console chimed again, this time with a priority flag. Vrel answered it with the exhaustion of someone who knew the news would not improve his day. Instructor Vrel, this is Admiral Korth of the Collective Strategic Command. We need Cadet Webb for a meeting with our Elite Forces Development Team, immediately. Of course you do, Vrel said. Marcus looked interested. Is this about the advanced course? There is no advanced course, Vrel repeated. But yes, they probably want to create one specifically for humans, which means more death traps, which means more humans asking for stopwatches, which means I am definitely transferring. Enjoy your meeting, Cadet Webb. Try not to traumatize any admirals. As Marcus left for his meeting, still checking his new stopwatch with obvious pleasure, Vrel sat down at his console and began drafting his transfer request. He typed with all four hands simultaneously, which was the Corinthian equivalent of stress typing. Behind him, Quinn approached one more time. Instructor, for what it's worth, that was the most incredible thing I have ever witnessed. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever witnessed, Vrel corrected, and I once saw a Vorith try to eat a star. What will you do now? Vrel saved his transfer request, marked it urgent, and pulled up the footage of Marcus's run one final time. 23 minutes and 47 seconds of pure, unfiltered human chaos. He watched Marcus tackle a combat drone, weaponize the facility's own defenses, and treat lethal injuries like minor inconveniences. I am going to file this report, Vrel said slowly. Then I'm going to recommend that the collective update every single combat training protocol to account for human psychology, which apparently operates on spite and curiosity rather than survival instinct. Then I am going to recommend we create a new category of warrior classification specifically for beings who treat impossible odds as a personal insult. And then I am going to work in archives. Quiet, peaceful archives where the most dangerous thing is a paper cut, and humans are not allowed because they would probably try to speed-run the filing system. Quinn laughed, saluted, and left Vrel to his paperwork. Down in the Strategic Command meeting, Marcus was being shown holographic projections of other training facilities, each one designed to be more challenging than the last. The admirals and generals were speaking in hushed tones about human potential, about new tactical possibilities, about revolutionizing combat doctrine. Marcus was nodding along politely, but his attention kept drifting to his new stopwatch. He had already calculated that if he could shave 3 minutes off each section of the gauntlet, he could get his time down to 15 minutes, maybe less. The thought made him smile. One of the admirals noticed. Cadet Webb, you seem pleased. Are you excited about the opportunities we're discussing? Oh, absolutely, Marcus said. I was just thinking, if the gauntlet is getting redesigned based on my run, that means I'll get to try the new version, right? See if it's actually harder or just different. The admirals exchanged glances. One of them, a grizzled Korthian with more scars than scales, leaned forward. Cadet Webb, do you understand that you have just completed what was considered the most dangerous training course in collective space? That you achieved something 473 species have attempted, and only a handful have survived? Yeah, It was pretty fun, Marcus said. Definitely got the adrenaline going. That's why I'm hoping the next version is actually challenging, you know? The drones were pretty easy to manipulate once you figured out their movement patterns, and the AI was too focused on standard tactics. If you could make it more adaptive, maybe throw in some random elements so you can't just memorize the route, that would be great. The Corthian admiral sat back slowly. You thought it was easy. Well, not easy, Marcus corrected, but definitely doable. I'm pretty sure I could get my time down with another attempt, maybe try different approaches to the plasma corridors, see if there's a faster route through the reality maze. The reality maze nearly drove 3 decorated veterans to permanent psychological collapse. Another admiral interrupted. Right, yeah, that's the brain fear room. Honestly, that one just needs better ventilation and maybe some actual danger to go with the psychological stuff. The combo would be way more effective. One admiral made a sound that the translator simply gave up on. Another started making notes on a datapad with increasing urgency. The Corthian admiral just stared at Marcus with the expression of someone who had been told the fundamental laws of physics were under review. Cadet Webb, he said finally, on behalf of the Collective Strategic Command, I would like to formally offer you a position in our experimental training division. We need someone who can stress test our facilities. Does it come with access to more courses? Marcus asked. Yes. And better stopwatches? This one's nice, but it only goes to hundredths of a second. Would be cool to get millisecond precision. We will acquire you the finest chronometric equipment in known space if you agree to stop treating our death traps like recreational activities. Marcus considered this. I can't promise that. But I can promise to file detailed feedback reports about how to make them more death-trappy. The admiral looked at his colleagues, who all wore expressions suggesting they had come to the same conclusion. Humans were simultaneously the best and worst thing to happen to military training. Deal, the Corthian said. Welcome to Special Operations Development, Cadet Webb. Try not to traumatize too many more instructors. No promises, Marcus said cheerfully. Back in the archives, his transfer had been approved with suspicious speed. Vrel was organizing historical combat records when he received a notification. Marcus Webb had been assigned to Special Operations Development. He would be testing new training courses across the collective. Vrel looked at the notification, looked at his nice, quiet archives full of documents that could not explode or develop sentience or ask him for a stopwatch, and felt a wave of relief. His comm unit buzzed. It was from the Special Operations Development Division head. Instructor Vrel, given your experience with Cadet Webb, we'd like to request your expertise in designing human-proof training scenarios. Vrel stared at the message, then at his transfer papers, then at the historical document in his hands, which was about a war that had ended 300 years ago and contained absolutely no humans doing inadvisable things at high speed. He typed back, respectfully declined. Also, there is no such thing as human-proof. They will find a way. They always find a way. Good luck. Then he turned off his comm unit, returned to his documents, and tried very hard not to think about what Marcus Webb might be doing at that exact moment. Somewhere in another facility, Marcus was standing at the entrance to a new course called the Omega Protocol, which had been specifically designed to be 3 times harder than the Gauntlet. He was stretching, checking his new military-grade chronometer that measured to microseconds and grinning like someone about to have the best day of their life. The facility AI announced, "Warning. This course has a 97% projected fatality rate. All participants must sign extensive liability waivers. Abort function available at all stations. Medical team standing by. Recommend full tactical planning before." Marcus was already running. The AI paused, checked its sensors, and in what might have been the digital equivalent of a sigh, updated its logs. Human detected. Updating projected fatality rate to unknown. Updating tactical models to apparently irrelevant. Updating recommended protocols to brace for impact. And in the quiet of the archives, Vrel heard the distant sound of alarms, explosion, and what he could swear was human laughter, and he smiled despite himself. Because the thing about humans, the thing that every other species was still trying to understand, was simple. They saw a warning that said, "This drill kills," and asked for a stopwatch. They saw impossible odds and heard a challenge. They experienced danger and felt alive. Humans, Vrel thought as he returned to his peaceful documents, were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but they were the only species in the known galaxy who treated the universe's attempts to kill them as a leaderboard. And somehow, terrifyingly, it worked.